I heard my husband with Alzheimer's say, "I just want her to divorce me," words that shattered the illusion I had been living in for months. Those whispered words, spoken in a moment he thought was private, revealed the cruelest deception I could have imagined. After 36 years of marriage, countless sacrifices, and unwavering devotion, my husband, Frank, wasn't losing his memory at all. He was methodically pushing me away so he could return to his former flame without bearing the guilt of ending our marriage himself. When Frank was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I didn't question it. The signs seemed clear: his confusion, the outbursts, the way he'd look at me with those vacant eyes and ask, "Who are you? Why are you in my house?" What struck me as odd was how selective his memory loss appeared to be. He remembered our son Timothy perfectly. He remembered old friends, childhood stories, even the intricate details of his investment business. But me, I had apparently been completely erased from his mind. Still, I remained steadfast. I cooked his favorite meals, cleaned up when he deliberately spilled food, endured his harsh words, and even suffered the humiliation of being physically pushed out of our home in the middle of winter, barefoot in the snow. I had built my entire identity around being a devoted wife and mother. My world revolved around our family, our home, and most importantly, around Frank. If caring for him meant weathering these storms, I was prepared to do so until the very end. That fateful night changed everything. I overheard him on the phone with an old friend, speaking with remarkable clarity. "I'm just trying to push her to say it first, to ask for a divorce. You know, Elaine's been struggling on her own all these years, raising kids, moving from place to place. I can't keep her waiting anymore." In that moment, the floor beneath me gave way. The disease, his entire performance, it was all a calculated ruse to reunite with his old flame without having to bear the burden of being the one to end our marriage. Days later, after collapsing and being hospitalized, Frank dropped his act entirely. Standing coldly by my hospital bed, he said, "Let's get a divorce," in the same tone one might use to discuss the weather. "Honestly, I was hoping you'd be the one to say it first," he added before walking out. Even our son seemed to be privy to this deception, avoiding my gaze when I confronted him. Something within me transformed that day. The woman who once believed her purpose was to support her husband, who would have done anything to preserve their marriage, suddenly saw with painful clarity that she had been clinging to an illusion. I returned home, packed a small suitcase, and faced Frank and his lover Elaine, who had boldly entered our home as if it were already hers. "I agree to the divorce," I said calmly. "Make time to finalize the papers," and walked out. My rebirth began with friendship. A young musician named Sarah, who saw something in me that I had forgotten existed. She offered me a room in her apartment, introduced me to new experiences, and encouraged me to document my journey on social media. For the first time in decades, I was making decisions solely for myself. I enrolled in adult education classes, learned to drive, bought a car, and began planning trips I had always dreamed of taking. The irony of life struck when Frank was genuinely diagnosed with Alzheimer's after marrying Elaine. The woman who had so eagerly inserted herself into our lives abandoned him when his outbursts and confusion became too much to bear. Timothy begged me to return, claiming his father was deteriorating rapidly and only remembered me. "Even if not for Dad, can't you visit more often for us?" he pleaded. My response shocked even myself. "No, I am myself first, before I'm anyone's mother." No sense of duty or guilt could pull me back into a life I had so deliberately shed. The ultimate irony wasn't lost on me when Frank was pretending to be sick. I was the only one he claimed to forget. But now that he was truly ill, I was the only one he remembered. As I stood watching the sunrise over a landscape I was visiting for the first time, I realized that life sometimes gives us second chances in the most unexpected ways. While I had learned this lesson late, it wasn't too late. At 60, my journey wasn't ending. It was finally, truly beginning. The night air was biting cold when Frank pushed me out of our home, the door slamming behind me with a finality that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. My bare feet hit the icy stone path, instantly numb from the cold, the sharp gravel biting into my soles. I stood there, shivering, without even my phone, looking at the house where I had spent over 3 decades of my life, a home where I was suddenly an unwelcome stranger. "I don't know you. Go away," he had said through the door, his voice cold and unfamiliar. The words stung worse than the freezing concrete beneath my feet. This wasn't the first time. Since Frank's Alzheimer's diagnosis a year ago, episodes like this had become our new normal. The cruel irony was that while he remembered our son Timothy, his childhood friends, even the names of distant business associates, I was the one person consistently erased from his memory. Dr. Matthews had explained it to me. With Alzheimer's, memories don't fade in order. Sometimes the first person a patient forgets is the one they were closest to, the one he loved most. See, those words became my lifeline in the darkest moments, when Frank would look at me with those unfamiliar, piercing eyes and demand over and over again, "Who are you? Why are you in my house?" Sometimes even shoving me roughly toward the door. I'd silently repeat Dr. Matthews' words in my mind. The first person he forgot was you, because you were the one he held dearest. Thankfully, Ella, our community security officer, spotted me that night. "Mrs. Kennedy, wait here. I'll grab the spare key for you," she said, hurrying off before returning with keys and a pair of thick winter shoes. "Wear mine for now. You'll get frostbite out here barefoot." When we reopened the door, Frank still didn't recognize me. Ella spoke firmly, like someone schooling a stubborn child. "Mr. Kennedy, a real man doesn't treat a woman this way." This woman standing next to me, Mrs. Charlotte Kennedy, is your legal wife. You've been married for decades. The caregivers never lasted. We'd gone through 7 in the past year. He'd either fly into sudden rages or throw tantrums over the smallest things. One by one, they all left. In the end, it was just me. I was the only one left who could handle him, the only one who still tried. Daily life became a battlefield of small indignities. I'd prepare his favorite tomato and egg noodles, only to have him deliberately spill the bowl. I'd clean up without complaint and make it again. During family dinners, he would pull his chair closer to Timothy, creating a deliberate distance from me, a small gesture that spoke volumes. Our son would glance at me, visibly uncomfortable, then turn to his father and whisper, "Dad, come on. Mom's not a stranger, and definitely not the enemy." Nights were the hardest. Frank would shove me awake at 2 a.m., grumbling that he was hungry. Despite my fever and exhaustion, I'd drag myself to the kitchen to prepare something. He'd take one bite, knock the entire bowl off the tray, then demand something else. I'd make that too, only to have him reject it again. This cycle would repeat until dawn sometimes, leaving me hollow-eyed and depleted. The physical toll was evident: the burns on my feet from spilled soup, the ache in my back from cleaning broken dishes, the constant sleep deprivation, but the emotional wounds cut deeper. Every time he looked through me as if I were invisible, every moment he pulled away when I tried to help him, another piece of my heart quietly broke off. Yet I persisted. I learned to swallow my tears, to force a smile, to keep going even when my body and spirit begged for rest. I told myself this was what love meant in its purest form, standing by someone when everything else falls apart, when they cannot even remember your name or the life you've built together. At dinner one evening, I watched as Frank ate everything on his plate except the braised ribs, the dish I'd made for him after every business trip for 30 years. Our special tradition. That single piece of meat left untouched felt like a final rejection, a symbol of all we had lost. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Charlotte," she said softly, "don't take it to heart. Frank's just like a child now. He can't tell closeness from distance anymore." I nodded, forcing down the lump in my throat, and silently went back to scrubbing dishes, letting the sound of running water drown out the ache in my heart. The woman who once argued passionately with neighbors if they offended my family, who would fight over a few cents with cashiers if I thought I was right, had become someone who quietly absorbed each slight, each rejection, each moment of being forgotten. This was the invisible labor of love, showing up day after day for someone who no longer recognized your face, continuing to care when care wasn't acknowledged, staying when every instinct screamed to run. I did it without expectation of gratitude or recognition, simply because I had promised to stand by him in sickness and in health. Little did I know that the greatest betrayal was yet to come, that this disease, this forgetting, was not a tragic twist of fate but a calculated performance, that the man I had devoted my life to caring for was fully aware of who I was all along, and was deliberately pushing me away to make room for someone else in his life. The feverish haze that had settled into my bones made every movement an effort that evening. I had caught a chill earlier in the day, likely from when Frank had locked me out in the snow. Still, I dutifully rose when he complained of hunger well past midnight, dragging my aching body to the kitchen to prepare his food. After he knocked the first bowl of macaroni and cheese to the floor with a single dismissive swipe, I silently reheated the portion I had made for myself. When he rejected that too, demanding chicken noodle soup instead, I complied without protest. This was our pattern, now his demands, my acquiescence, the endless cycle of patience meeting petulance. "Just turn on the TV. I want to see cartoons," he muttered, after taking only a few sips of the soup I'd carefully prepared, afraid he'd wake Timothy and his family who were visiting. I turned on the television in our bedroom, lowered the volume, and returned to the kitchen to clean the mess on the floor. That's when I noticed something strange. The volume on the television had been turned all the way up loud. Jarring voices filled the hallway. Through that noise, I heard something else, Frank's voice, coming from the balcony. But this wasn't the confused, childlike voice I'd grown accustomed to over the past year. This was clear, articulate, purposeful. I slowed my steps, careful not to make a sound, and moved quietly toward the door. He wasn't watching TV at all. He was on the balcony, phone pressed to his ear, speaking with a clarity and sharpness I hadn't witnessed in months. There was no confusion, no mental fog, no childlike daze. His posture was firm, his voice cold, calm, deliberate. I leaned in closer, barely breathing. On the other end of the line, someone chuckled. "The way you're acting lately, throwing fits like a toddler. How does your wife even put up with you?" Frank responded flatly. "That's the point. I want to push her to the edge, to make her snap first. I want her to be the one to ask for a divorce. You know, Elaine's been on her own for years. raising her kid alone, struggling to get by. I can't keep her waiting. There was a pause on the other end, then, is that really fair to Charlotte? She's just a traditional housewife. Her whole life has been about you. She doesn't know the law, doesn't know how to protect herself. You really want to force her into a divorce like this. Wouldn't it be better if you just told her yourself? At least that way she could walk away with a little dignity. Silence. And then everything inside me collapsed. So this was it. Frank wasn't sick at all. The Alzheimer's, the memory loss, the confusion, the tantrums, it was all an act. He just wanted to push me away. He wanted me to leave so he could go back to Elaine without guilt, without blame, without consequence. I stood frozen by the door, my body trembling uncontrollably. So, this is what it all came down to. Everything. Every tear I held back, every meal I cooked, every humiliation I endured, it was all just a stage for his clean exit, a tidy excuse to make room for an old love. Me, I had been clinging to a marriage that was already gone. 36 years. And in the end, I was the only one still trying. Something inside me broke. The last of my strength gave out, and the room began to spin. The bowl of soup in my hand slipped through my fingers and shattered on the floor, broth and noodles spilling across the tiles. Before my vision went completely dark, I thought I saw Frank rushing toward me, but maybe that was just a dream. Because in all the years I'd loved him, that was the first time I'd ever seen him run to me. I woke up in the hospital, the stark white ceiling swimming into focus. Timothy and Sarah were seated by my bedside, watching over me. Frank stood silently by the door, his expression cold and unreadable. For a moment, I wished I could close my eyes and wake up somewhere else, anywhere but here. "You're awake." Frank stepped closer to the bed, his tone flat, as if he were commenting on the weather. There was no guilt in his eyes, not even a flicker, just quiet indifference, like this was all expected, like he wasn't even trying to keep up the charade anymore. I didn't even realize I was crying until the tears had already soaked my cheeks. "Let's get a divorce," Frank said, cutting me off before I could speak. His voice was detached, as if he were offering a weather forecast instead of ending a marriage. "Honestly," he added casually, "I was hoping you'd be the one to say it first." And then he turned around and walked out of the room. Timothy and Sarah exchanged a glance. No one said a word. I sat there in silence, numb. Only then did it truly hit me. Frank's phone call on the balcony that night, he wanted me to hear it. The whole act, his so-called illness, had been a lie, a carefully crafted performance, a role he played until the script got too messy. So he simply walked off stage, and I was left behind, choking on the wreckage of a story I thought we were still writing together. The sobs came fast and uncontrollably. I buried my face in my hands and let them tear through me. Timothy reached over, placing a tentative hand on my shoulder. "Mom, don't take it too hard. Maybe Dad didn't mean to hurt you." I lifted my head abruptly, my voice shaking. "You knew, didn't you? You knew he was faking it." And his eyes flickered, and his fingers brushed his nose, his old tell whenever he lied. "Of course not. Mom," he said too quickly. "I only just found out, too." I watched the door slowly close behind him as he hurried out. And in that moment, I felt the last pieces of me fall apart. Even my own son had chosen Frank's side. They'd planned this together, worked out every angle just to push me to say those two words first: I want a divorce. In the quiet of that hospital room, surrounded by the sharp sting of disinfectant and the soft beeping of monitors. I made a decision. If that's what Frank wanted, a clean break, a new beginning with his old flame, then I would give it to him. But it would be on my terms, not his. Not because I had been manipulated into it, but because I chose it. I stood in the towering lobby of Frank's corporate headquarters, acutely aware of the stares and whispers surrounding me. The security guard at the front desk had just stopped me with skepticism in his eyes. "Ma'am, who are you here to see? Do you have an appointment?" "I'm here to see Frank Kennedy. I'm his wife. I'm here to discuss our divorce." The words fell into the air like a dropped glass, shattering the polished corporate atmosphere. Heads turned instantly. Employees nearby glanced up, curiosity blooming on their faces. Whispers rippled through the lobby. "Wait, isn't the boss's wife that woman in the pencil skirts who's always walking around the office? Who's this seriously? She's Mrs. Kennedy. She doesn't look the part." I didn't flinch at their judgments. Instead, I pulled out our marriage certificate from my folder and held it up for everyone to see. The lobby erupted in hushed chaos, and right on cue, Timothy burst out of the elevator, eyes wide with alarm. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I gave him a composed smile. "I came to get a divorce." Frank appeared next, and almost theatrically. Elaine stepped in right behind him, perfectly timed, perfectly poised, playing her part as the wounded woman standing quietly by her man's side. The whispers grew louder. "Wow, this is like something out of a drama. The wife, the mistress. So who's the real Mrs. Kennedy now?" Frank's expression darkened as he scanned the crowd. "Enough," he snapped, and people scattered instantly. I handed him the folder containing the divorce agreement. The moment his eyes landed on the document, his lips curled into a cold, condescending smile. Well, well, you really know how to put on a show," he sneered. "How the hell did you figure all this out?" I raised an eyebrow. "The terms of the property settlement." Did he really think I'd be clueless forever, that I'd beg to stay, humiliate myself, plead for scraps, or maybe he never imagined I'd beat him to the finish line? He didn't know Sarah had opened my eyes to possibilities I'd never considered. She was the one who reminded me. This isn't the old world anymore. Divorce isn't a man's game. His word doesn't dictate the outcome. She'd even connected me with a lawyer, a sharp one. Together, we had drafted the agreement line by line, spelling out every clause with clarity and precision. Frank's face tightened, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. With a mocking edge to his voice, he muttered, "You actually have friends now." I met his gaze without flinching. "I do now." It was true. For years, I'd revolved around this family, pouring every ounce of energy into it, while never truly having a life of my own, let alone a friend. But that chapter was over. Elaine stepped forward, her voice soft and saccharine. "Charlotte, don't take it the wrong way. Frank's just worried about you. He doesn't want you getting mixed up with the wrong crowd." I looked at her perfectly made-up face, that gentle tone, the polished grace she always wore like armor. But beneath it, I saw her clearly for what she was. She was the wrong crowd. I cut her off, my voice firm with impatience. "I don't need your concern, and I certainly don't need your advice on who I should be friends with. I'm perfectly capable of making that judgment myself. My life doesn't need either of you dictating how I should live it." I pulled out the divorce agreement, my tone crisp and final. "Let's take it straight to the courthouse. I have other things to do. Don't waste my time. I'm trying to start a new life." Timothy stepped forward and grabbed my arm, his expression tense. "Mom, don't do this. I know Dad was wrong, but he deserves a chance to pursue his happiness, too. I yanked my arm free, my voice cold and cutting. I don't have a son who takes someone else's side over mine. Looking at him, standing there like a neutral mediator, rational and detached, I felt a wave of nausea, so cleanly, so easily. He turned away from me, and in that moment, I truly regretted bringing him into this world. At the courthouse, with lawyers present, the agreement was submitted and reviewed. The judge verified both signatures, confirmed the terms, and then stamped and signed the final decree. And just like that, I had it in my hands, the official divorce judgment. As I stepped out into the sunlight, I exhaled slowly, the weight on my chest finally lifting. The heaviness I'd been carrying for years was gone. Frank walked beside me in silence, his eyes cast downward. I didn't know what he was thinking, but I could imagine maybe satisfaction, maybe a strange emptiness, maybe for the first time. It hit him that this wasn't just a convenient escape. It was an ending, one he couldn't undo. He slid his hands into his pockets and muttered, "Where are you headed? I'll give you a ride." It was the first time in years he'd offered to take me anywhere. I turned to him, my voice even. "No, thank you." My tone was cool, my message crystal clear. I had nothing left to say to him, and not a single drop of energy to waste. I walked away without looking back, my steps growing lighter with each block between us. For the first time in decades, I wasn't someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's caretaker. I was just Charlotte, a woman at the threshold of a life that was finally, truly her own. That evening, I snapped a photo of the divorce decree and sent it to Sarah. She called within seconds, her voice jubilant. "Oh my God, congratulations. Welcome to the reboot phase of your life." I smiled. Not long ago, I would have been mortified to say I was a divorced woman. I used to think being abandoned by a husband was the ultimate disgrace, a symbol of failure. But now, all I wanted was to go back and give that younger version of me a good slap across the face. This isn't shameful. This isn't pitiful. This is freedom. Press this button, then wait for the light to turn green before you accelerate, Sarah instructed, her voice patient as I gripped the steering wheel with nervous determination. At 62, I was finally learning to drive something I never imagined doing when I was Mrs. Frank Kennedy, devoted wife and homemaker. The car lurched forward slightly before I found my rhythm. I couldn't help but laugh at myself, a sound that had become increasingly familiar over the past few months. Look at me now, Sarah. If only the ladies from my old neighborhood could see this. That first driving lesson marked just one of many firsts in my new life after divorce. When I walked away from that courthouse 3 months ago, divorce papers in hand, I had no roadmap for what came next. For 36 years, my identity had been wrapped up in being Frank's wife, Timothy's mother, the woman who managed the household with quiet efficiency while asking for little in return. Finding an apartment with Sarah had been my first step toward independence. Her spare room became my sanctuary, a space that was mine alone, decorated according to my tastes, without anyone else's input or approval. The orange tabby cat who had adopted us both would curl up at my feet each night, his gentle purring a reminder that I wasn't alone in this new chapter. "You should document your journey," Sarah suggested one evening as we shared a bottle of wine. "There are so many women out there just like you, afraid to leave unhappy marriages, unsure of what comes next. Your story could help them see there's life after divorce, even after 60. I scoffed initially. Who would want to hear from me? I'm just figuring things out myself. But Sarah was persistent. She helped me set up a social media account and taught me how to record short videos. Just be yourself, she advised. Talk about what you're learning, what you're feeling. Be honest about the struggles and the victories. My first video was awkward and halting. I sat at our kitchen table, introduced myself nervously, and simply shared what my day as a newly single woman looked like. "Welcome to Divorce Diaries by Aunt Charlotte," I began, following the script Sarah had helped me prepare. Let's take a look at what a day in the life of an independent woman born in the 1960s looks like. To my astonishment, that first post received over 5,000 likes. Sarah read the comments to me, grinning from ear to ear. "Charlotte Auntie's life is so real and comforting. There's something soft and healing about her presence. I swear I want to try her chicken noodle soup so badly." Internet mom goals. "You've got a fan base now." Sarah laughed. "These young people are obsessed with your videos." So I kept going. I started posting more clips, little slices of my everyday life cooking, playing with the cat, cleaning the house, and even snippets from my adult education classes. That's right, I'd gone back to school. I never had the chance to complete my education when I was younger, always putting Frank's career and Timothy's needs before my own. But now, at 62, I was taking courses at the local community college, slowly filling in the gaps I once thought would remain empty forever. The chores I used to perform without thinking, peeling garlic, folding laundry, mopping the floor, suddenly became quiet metaphors, resonating with people I'd never met. Somehow, my ordinary life made others feel seen. My southern accent, which I'd always been self-conscious about, became something viewers found endearing rather than provincial. Honestly, it was the only version that looked halfway decent. I admitted in one video, showing before and after clips of my attempts at video editing. Back then, I still stumbled over my words and looked painfully awkward in front of the camera. But now, I can speak freely, looking straight into the lens without flinching, sharing my story without shame. The responses flooded in, "You inspire me to start over at 45. Watching you learn new things makes me feel less scared about changing careers. Your cooking videos remind me of my grandmother, but your independence reminds me to be strong." One afternoon, my phone rang. It was Timothy. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. "Mom, I saw your videos," he began, his tone somewhere between concern and judgment. "You're putting yourself out there online, talking about the divorce and everything. I just thought, at your age, is that really necessary? I mean, if Dad sees it, he won't be thrilled." I felt my blood boil. Putting myself out there. What do you think I'm doing? Committing a crime? Or are you just as clueless as your father? There was a stunned silence on the other end. "I'm just worried about you," he mumbled. Then a beat later, he added softly, "Liam misses you. He keeps asking why you don't come visit. And Dad's lost a lot of weight. He's not eating or sleeping well. Do you think there's still a chance for you two?" I snorted. "Don't be ridiculous." I already knew what was going on. Word travels fast in small circles. Frank and Elaine had already registered their marriage a few days ago, newlywed, glowing, and in love. Not eating, not sleeping. He was likely busy sipping champagne by the beach. I flipped through my course catalog as I replied flatly, "Unless it's an emergency, don't call me again. I'm busy." I ended the call without another word and returned to planning my next steps. Lately, I'd learned so much, everything from advanced video editing to proper storytelling structure. I was finally reclaiming the time I'd once given away so freely, finally putting it towards something that felt like mine. Next on my list, getting my own car. I was planning a road trip, just me, the open highway, and the whole world waiting beyond the city lines. There was so much to see. And now I finally had the freedom to see it. "Congrats," Sarah said that night, looping her arm around my shoulder as she walked through the door after work. "You've officially transformed into a modern, independent woman." Looking back at this woman I was just 6 months ago, the one who quietly absorbed slights and rejections, who measured her worth through her husband's approval, I barely recognized her. That woman would never have imagined learning to drive at 62, going back to school, or becoming what Sarah jokingly called an internet sensation. But perhaps the greatest transformation wasn't in the new skills I'd acquired, or even the growing confidence in my videos. It was in realizing that the ending of my marriage wasn't the ending of my story. It was just the beginning of a chapter that was finally, truly mine. The sterile hospital corridor felt oddly familiar as I walked toward the elevator, clutching my routine checkup results. I'd only come to collect my annual physical report. My health had been excellent lately, something Dr. Matthews attributed to my newfound freedom. "Divorce suits you," he'd joked earlier, noting my improved vitals and the healthy glow that had replaced my once perpetual exhaustion. I was halfway to the elevator when I saw them, Frank and Elaine, arm in arm, walking toward me from the opposite direction. I instinctively turned my head, planning to walk right past them like they were strangers. But Elaine made sure that wouldn't happen. "Well, isn't this a surprise?" she called out sweetly, her voice carrying through the lobby. "Charlotte, what brings you to the hospital? Not feeling well?" As she spoke, she lifted her hand ever so casually, flashing the glint of a large diamond ring, making sure I couldn't miss it. She wanted me to see it, to know that they'd officially tied the knot, that she had secured her place in the life I had left behind. I gave her a brief glance, then turned my eyes to Frank. For a second, his expression faltered. A flicker of panic crossed his face, small but noticeable. "Are you okay?" he asked quickly. "Did you see a doctor? How have you been?" Elaine stood beside him, her forced smile stretching tight across her face, one of those expressions that looked more like a grimace than a grin. "I'm fine, thank you," I said flatly. Then I walked past them without another word. As the elevator doors closed behind me, a chill ran through me, not from nostalgia, but from clarity, cold, steady clarity. I wasn't shaken. I wasn't sad. I was more certain than ever that I had made the right choice. Upstairs, Dr. Matthews was already flipping through my report when I walked in. He glanced up, eyes scanning me for a moment. "Well, from the numbers, you're in excellent health," he said with a warm smile. "Actually, you look better than ever, glowing even. Your skin looks brighter. Your energy is better. I'd say the divorce suits you." He chuckled. "I hear you've been doing some kind of lifestyle videos online. My wife's a huge fan. Says she wants to start her own channel now." I nodded. "It's just a little something to keep my days in rhythm. I've got time, and a young friend encouraged me to give it a try. I never expected it to get so much attention." But then Dr. Matthews' smile faded, his tone shifting. "Is it really over between you and Frank?" He hesitated, then added, "From the way he looked earlier, I don't know. I don't think he's over you." He leaned back, sighing. "He hasn't been in great shape lately. Age is catching up with him. He's slowing down, and it's starting to show." I paused, unsure what to say. Frank had a new life now. I had mine. We had drifted so far apart. It felt like we lived in separate worlds. And still, People tried to weave our names back together again, as if it were possible to stitch old chapters into a new book. Why do people do that? I finally asked. Why do they keep trying to piece together a story that's already ended? Why insist that two people who have already gone their separate ways should somehow find their way back again? Dr. Matthews looked slightly taken aback by my directness. People from our generation always say, "Don't break it, fix it," I continued. They think staying together is the noble thing, the right thing, the only thing. But today's younger generation understands something better. Sometimes the truest kindness is letting go. Sometimes walking away is the most dignified closure you can give each other. I sat quietly for a moment, then said softly but firmly, "Times have changed. Alan, when love no longer fits, you don't keep wearing it out of habit. I'm not going back to Frank. That chapter's over." Dr. Matthews rubbed the bridge of his nose, clearly a little embarrassed by how firmly I'd shut down his suggestion. "You're right," he murmured. "I guess I just wanted to see you happy again. We've been neighbors so long. It's hard not to care." Then after a beat of hesitation, he added quietly, "But Charlotte, this time Frank really is sick." The irony hit me like a physical blow. Frank, who had once faked Alzheimer's just to push me away, had now been truly diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. When Dr. Matthews told me, I simply shrugged. So what? Taking care of Frank isn't my responsibility anymore. That role has long been passed on to someone who supposedly belongs there now. I didn't have time for sympathy, much less nostalgia. I had continuing education classes to attend, driving lessons to schedule, content to film, and videos to edit for my social media page. 2 weeks later, Timothy called again. His voice sounded strained, desperate. "Mom, Dad's missing. He slipped away when the caregiver wasn't looking. We can't find him anywhere." I let out a quiet laugh. "Do you know where I am? Right now, I'm at Yellowstone National Park. I'm probably hundreds of miles from home." There was a pause. Then the line went dead. Later, he sent a message. They'd found Frank at a small rural train station just outside the city. He was shivering, confused, mumbling the same words over and over. "I need to find Charlotte. I want to read to her. She loves when I read to her." Timothy said no matter what they told him, Frank wouldn't budge. He just sat on that bench, clutching his coat, repeating my name like it was the only thing left in his mind. He only agreed to go back when Timothy finally said, "Charlotte's waiting for you at home." His condition was rapidly deteriorating. Back when he was pretending to be sick, I was the only one he claimed to forget. But now that he was truly ill, I was the only one he remembered. The videos kept coming, Frank stuffing freshly cooked ribs into his coat pocket, mumbling, "Gotta take these home. Charlotte will cook them for me." Another clip showed him hunched over with reading glasses, clutching a few worn books, whispering, "I need to read to Jade. She loves when I read to her." I watched the footage without flinching. Timothy pleaded with me again. "Mom, even if not for Dad, can't you visit more often for us?" I replied calmly. "No, I am myself first before I'm anyone's mother. No one, no blood tie, no guilt, no sense of duty could drag me back into a life I'd already shed." "I have to go," I said as I hung up. "The sunrise is about to begin." I stood at the edge of a quiet valley, watching as the first golden light stretched across the sky. Sarah's words echoed in my mind again. Past costs shouldn't dictate future decisions. I'd learned that lesson late in life, but not too late, because now my life was just beginning. Mom, please. Timothy's voice cracked slightly over the phone. Just come for dinner this Sunday. Dad's having one of his better days. He keeps asking for you. I tucked the phone between my ear and shoulder as I arranged flowers in my new apartment, a bright, sunlit space overlooking a small park. 9 months had passed since the divorce, and these calls had become increasingly frequent as Frank's condition deteriorated. Timothy, we've discussed this, I replied, keeping my voice level. I've made my decision. I'm not coming back, not even for a visit. You don't have to come back, he countered quickly. Just visit, just once. The doctors say familiar faces can help slow the progression. Sarah says you could consider it an act of compassion, not obligation. I smiled slightly at the mention of my former daughter-in-law. She'd been the only one who hadn't pressured me to return to my caretaking role, who understood that my newfound independence wasn't something I should have to sacrifice, not even for family. Using Sarah against me. That's a new tactic, I observed, setting down the pruning shears. Did she actually say that? Or are you just hoping I'll believe she did? His silence told me everything. That's what I thought, I said softly. After hanging up, I sank into my favorite armchair, a vibrant teal piece I'd purchased with my first paycheck from the community college, where I now worked as an administrative assistant 3 days a week. Teaching assistant, they called it. Though most of my job involved helping adult students navigate the enrollment system and find resources. The work was simple but fulfilling, helping others find their way through a system that had once intimidated me too. My phone chimed with a text message from Elaine. Charlotte, I know we have our differences, but Frank needs you. His condition is getting worse. I'm at my wit's end. Can we please talk? So it had come to this, the woman who had schemed her way into my marriage, who had been complicit in a cruel deception, was now begging for my help. I deleted the message without responding. The irony wasn't lost on me. Frank had pretended to have Alzheimer's to escape our marriage and return to Elaine. Now he actually had the disease, and Elaine was trying to escape the burden of caring for him, a burden she had once been so eager to take from me. I received word through mutual acquaintances that the once polished, confident Elaine had begun venting to neighbors, "This old man is driving me insane." Eventually, she filed for divorce, taking a substantial amount of money with her before disappearing altogether. The woman who had once played the wounded victim, standing quietly by Frank's side in his office lobby, had abandoned him the moment his illness became inconvenient. 3 days after Elaine left, Timothy appeared at my door unannounced, his face haggard from lack of sleep. "Mom," he began without preamble, "Dad's caregivers quit. We can't find anyone willing to stay longer than a week. He keeps wandering off, looking for you." I leaned against the door frame, not inviting him in. "I'm sorry to hear that, Timothy. That sounds very difficult for everyone." His eyes flashed with frustration. "That's it, sorry to hear that, Mom. He's your husband, ex-husband." I corrected gently but firmly. "For 36 years, don't you feel any responsibility, any compassion?" I met his gaze steadily. "I gave that man my entire life, Timothy, every dream I had. I set aside for him, every ambition, every desire, subjugated to his needs and wants. I cooked for him, cleaned for him, raised his child, supported his career, and forgave his infidelities." Timothy flinched at the last word, but I continued. "When he pretended to have Alzheimer's, yes, pretended, a cruel deception you were complicit in, I cared for him without complaint. I cleaned up after his deliberately spilled meals. I endured being pushed out into the snow, barefoot. I absorbed his daily rejection, his refusal to recognize me, all while telling myself it was the disease, not him. I took a deep breath, and then I discovered it was all a performance, a calculated effort to force me to ask for a divorce so he could absolve himself of guilt, so he could be with Elaine without having to be the bad guy. Timothy looked down, unable to meet my eyes. You want to talk about responsibility, about compassion. Where was his responsibility to the vows he made? Where was his compassion when he deliberately traumatized me day after day, pretending not to know me? Where was your compassion when you knew what he was doing and said nothing? The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken recriminations. I have rebuilt my life, I continued, my voice softer now. I have an apartment I love, a job that gives me purpose, friends who value me, and plans for my future that don't revolve around being someone's caretaker. I will not give that up. Not for Frank, not for you, not for anyone. But he remembers you now, Timothy whispered. Out of everyone, you're the only one he still recognizes. Isn't that worth something? I shook my head slowly. The great irony, Timothy, is that when he was pretending to be sick, I was the only one he claimed to forget. Now that he's truly ill, I'm the only one he remembers him. And you know what? That's not my problem. A week later, I received a video of Frank sitting in a hospital bed, his head wrapped in bandages after a fall. When the nurse asked if he knew who was coming to visit, his face lit up. Charlotte is coming home, he said with absolute certainty. The nurse glanced uncomfortably at the camera. No, Mr. Kennedy, your son Timothy is coming. No, Frank insisted, becoming agitated. Charlotte is coming. She always comes home. I watched the video once, then deleted it. The next day, I drove to Yellowstone National Park, the first stop on the cross-country road trip I'd been planning for months. As I stood watching the sunrise over the majestic landscape, my phone buzzed with yet another call from Timothy. Mom, Dad's missing again. He slipped out when the new caregiver wasn't looking. We're searching everywhere. I'm at Yellowstone, I replied simply. I can't help you. That evening, Timothy texted that they'd found Frank at the train station again, refusing to leave until Charlotte came to get him. He only agreed to come home when we told him you were waiting there. The message read. I turned my phone off and slipped it into my bag. Standing on the edge of that magnificent valley, watching eagles soar through the vast open sky, I finally understood what true freedom meant. It wasn't selfishness to protect the life I'd built. It wasn't cruelty to maintain boundaries with those who had betrayed my trust. It was self-preservation. It was self-respect. It was, at long last, putting myself first. The autumn leaves crunched beneath my feet as I walked through the community garden where I'd recently started volunteering. 9 months into my new life, I'd established a routine that brought me genuine contentment working part-time at the college, filming my divorce diaries videos, taking classes, and now tending to these carefully planted rows of vegetables and flowers. My hands, once soft from years of housework, had developed new calluses from digging in the earth, a tangible symbol of my transformation. My phone vibrated in my pocket, Timothy again. I let it go to voicemail, as I had done repeatedly over the past few weeks. His messages followed a predictable pattern, now updates on Frank's deteriorating condition, pleas for me to visit, suggestions that my presence might somehow slow the progression of his disease. Today's voicemail hit the same notes, but with a new detail that made me pause mid-stride. Mom, I don't know if you'll listen to this, but Dad's condition has gotten much worse since his fall. The doctors say the head injury accelerated the Alzheimer's. But here's the thing, you're still the only person he consistently remembers. He keeps hiding food in his pockets, saying he needs to take it home to you, yesterday. He spent hours reading aloud from an old book, insisting that you love hearing him read. It's like his mind has traveled back in time to when you were young together. I closed my eyes, memories washing over me unbidden. Frank reading poetry to me in the early days of our relationship. His voice soft and melodious. How I'd hang on every word, mesmerized, not just by the verses, but by the fact that this brilliant, ambitious man would share such intimate moments with me. How those readings had gradually become less frequent, then stopped altogether as his focus shifted elsewhere to his career, his ambitions, and eventually to Elaine. The voicemail continued. The nurse found him trying to leave at 3 a.m. When they asked where he was going, he said, "I need to find Charlotte and she's waiting for me." Mom, I know what he did was unforgivable, but isn't there some small part of you that could find it in your heart to visit just once? I deleted the message and continued my walk, but Timothy's words lingered. The cruel irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. For months, Frank had methodically pretended not to know who I was, had looked through me with cold, unfamiliar eyes, had pushed me away with calculated cruelty, all to manipulate me into asking for a divorce. And now, when he truly was lost in the fog of Alzheimer's, I was apparently the only person anchored firmly in his deteriorating memory. Dr. Matthews had explained this phenomenon during one of my checkups. With Alzheimer's, the emotional centers of the brain sometimes preserve memories differently than the cognitive centers. The people and experiences that created the strongest emotional imprints often remain when other memories fade. It's not uncommon for patients to remember distant past events more clearly than recent ones. So you're saying it's possible that Frank genuinely only remembers me now? I had asked. Not just possible, likely. Dr. Matthews had replied. The emotional connection formed over decades of marriage would create powerful neural pathways that might withstand the disease's progression longer than more recent memories. Like his relationship with Elaine, I had observed, unable to keep the bitter edge from my voice. Dr. Matthews had nodded. Precisely. These thoughts swirled in my mind as I drove home from the garden. When I reached my apartment, there was a package waiting at my door. Inside was a DVD with a simple note in Timothy's handwriting. Please watch this. You don't have to respond or visit. Just watch. Against my better judgment, I placed the disc in my laptop. The video showed Frank in his hospital bed, head bandaged from his recent fall. A nurse off camera was asking him questions. "Mr. Kennedy, do you know what year it is?" Frank shook his head, confusion evident in his eyes. "Do you know where you are?" Another head shake. "Can you tell me who this is?" The nurse held up a photo of Timothy. Frank squinted at the image. "My son's name is Timothy," he said slowly. "But this is a grown man. My Timothy is just a boy. And do you recognize this woman?" The nurse showed him a recent photo of me, taken from my social media page. Frank's entire demeanor changed. His eyes lit up, his posture straightened, and a smile transformed his face. "Charlotte," he said without hesitation. "My Charlotte." "And who is Charlotte to you?" "She's my wife," he said with absolute certainty, "the most important person in my life." The nurse pushed gently. "Can you tell me about her?" Frank's smile grew tender. "She's the strongest woman I know. Stubborn, too. Follows me around with lunch boxes. always making sure I eat enough. Sneaks into the back of my night classes just to hear me read. He paused, his expression softening further. I don't deserve her. Not really. But she loves me anyway. I realized with a start that Frank wasn't describing our recent past at all. He was recalling our earliest days together, back in our small hometown, before his college years, before our marriage, before Elaine ever entered the picture. "Where is Charlotte now?" the nurse asked. Frank's face clouded. "I don't know," he admitted, a tremor entering his voice. "I keep looking for her. I need to find her. I want to read to her. She loves when I read to her." I closed the laptop, my heart racing. The Frank in that video wasn't the calculating man who had cruelly deceived me. He wasn't the successful businessman who had carried on an affair for years. He was the young man I had fallen in love with decades ago, before ambition hardened him, before resentment took root between us. The ultimate irony was almost too much to bear. For years, I had been the one desperately trying to be seen, to be remembered, to matter. Now, in some twisted cosmic joke, I was the only thing Frank could remember, the only person who remained clear in his rapidly disintegrating mind. I walked to my window, watching as evening settled over the park across the street. Children were being called home for dinner, dog walkers were taking their final strolls, and the street lights were just beginning to flicker on. This was my life now, peaceful, independent, mine. The first person he forgot was you, because you were the one he held dearest. Dr. Matthews had once told me, trying to comfort me when I believed Frank's Alzheimer's was real. And now, the last person he remembers is you, for the same reason. I closed the curtains and turned away. Whatever Frank Kennedy remembered or forgot was no longer my concern. The woman he was looking for, that young, hopeful girl who had followed him adoringly, she didn't exist anymore. She had grown, changed, and finally, gloriously, set herself free. I stood in the kitchen of my sun-drenched apartment, carefully packaging small bags of flour I'd milled myself from the autumn wheat I'd grown on my old property. 9 parcels for my internet children, the devoted followers who had cheered me on through every step of my transformation, and 1 special, larger bag for Sarah, without whom none of this would have been possible. As I tied each package with a simple twine ribbon, I marveled at how different my hands looked now, tanned from gardening, with new calluses from driving and typing. No longer the soft, tired hands of a woman whose primary purpose was serving others. These were the hands of someone who created, who built, who lived on her own terms. It had been 14 months since I walked out of that courthouse with my divorce papers. 14 months of rebuilding a life that was truly mine. The journey hadn't been without obstacles. Finding employment at my age had proven challenging, with managers scanning my resume only to gently decline. "You have a lot of life experience, ma'am, but we're looking for someone a little younger." Their rejection hadn't deterred me. After years of managing a household, keeping track of appointments, maintaining schedules, and handling finances, I knew my worth, even if the job market didn't immediately recognize it. Sarah had been the one to suggest applying at the community college. "They value life experience there," she'd said, and she'd been right. 3 days a week. I now assisted adult learners navigate the very system I'd once found so intimidating. Remember when you couldn't even step into the administration building without feeling out of place? Sarah teased one evening as we shared dinner. "Now look at you, the students asked for you specifically." I smiled at the memory. I was terrified the first time I had to help someone fill out financial aid forms. Now I could do it in my sleep. The transformation extended beyond employment. I'd enrolled in adult education courses myself, slowly filling in the gaps in my formal education that had always made me feel inferior, especially around Frank and his well-educated colleagues. Literature, history, basic accounting subjects I'd once believed were beyond my reach now filled my evenings with discovery and fulfillment. My divorce diaries videos had taken on a life of their own. What began as awkward, hesitant recordings had evolved into confident discussions about reinvention in one's 60s. Women from across the country, many in situations painfully similar to my former life, reached out with their stories, their questions, their gratitude. You gave me courage to leave after 42 years. One message read, I kept thinking it was too late to start over, but you showed me it's never too late. The road hadn't been without its difficult moments. The public smear campaign orchestrated by Elaine had briefly derailed my newfound confidence. I lost my lover to a woman who trapped him for years. She'd written anonymously on a women's empowerment forum. Even after fate finally brought us back together, she refused to let go. She uses their divorce as publicity, uploading videos of her new life just to lure him back in. The comments that followed had been vicious, turning seemingly overnight from support to condemnation. The same people who had once found comfort in my warmth and daily routines now attacked me as manipulative, attention-seeking, cold-hearted. For a moment, I'd considered shutting down my accounts, retreating back into the shadows. But Sarah wouldn't hear of it. This is exactly what they want, Jed, she'd said fiercely. They want to shame you back into silence, back into the box they think women your age should stay in. So instead of retreating, I'd faced the camera directly and told my truth. The full story, Frank's deception, the fake illness, the years of emotional manipulation, the devastating moment of discovery. I'd shown the divorce decree, spoken plainly about the timeline, and refused to sugarcoat any of it. I'm not asking for sympathy, I'd concluded. I just think every person who's been silenced deserves to be heard. The tide had turned after that. People began cross-checking facts, questioning narratives, digging deeper. Old photographs emerged of Frank and Elaine together during periods when he'd claimed to be on business trips. Former neighbors and community members came forward with their observations of his convenient symptoms. Even Ella, our former security guard, confirmed she'd never believed Frank's behavior matched genuine Alzheimer's. As truth prevailed, the insincere apologies began rolling in from Timothy, who suddenly wanted to mend fences, from Frank himself, offering to end his marriage to Elaine, from old friends who'd been quick to judge. I deleted them all. My life was no longer defined by their approval or shaped by their expectations. Now, standing in my kitchen, packaging flour from wheat I'd planted and harvested with my own hands, I felt a sense of completion. I'd come full circle from a young woman who measured her worth through others' eyes to a woman who understood her own value. My phone chimed with a notification, a comment on my latest video, where I discussed my upcoming road trip. Aunt Charlotte, I've been following your journey from the beginning, and I just want to say thank you. My mother left an abusive relationship at 58 and was convinced her life was over. Your videos showed her it was just beginning. She's taking flying lessons now. I smiled as I read the message, remembering Dr. Kent Matthews' words during my last checkup. You know, Charlotte, you've become something of an inspiration around here. My wife quotes you at dinner, says you've got more courage than most people half your age. Outside my window, the city was coming alive with evening activity, people hurrying home from work, couples walking hand in hand, children playing in the last light of day. In 2 days, I would be on the road, my car packed with only what I needed, my route mapped but flexible, destinations chosen solely according to my interests. No one would be waiting impatiently for dinner to be served. No one would question my choices or belittle my enthusiasm. No one would pretend not to know me when the mood struck. This journey, both the literal road trip and the larger journey of reclaiming my life, was mine alone. As I sealed the last package of flour, I reflected on a truth I wished I'd understood decades earlier. It's never too late to become the person you were meant to be. Some of us just take a longer route to get there. I picked up my phone and began recording a new video. Hello, everyone. Aunt Charlotte here. Today, I want to talk about something important about how the end of one chapter isn't the end of your story. Sometimes, it's just the beginning of the part where you finally get to be the main character. As I stand at the lookout point in Yellowstone, watching the sunrise paint the valley in shades of gold and amber, I can't help but reflect on the journey that brought me here. At 62, I'm finally living life on my own terms, driving cross-country, documenting my adventures, and building connections with people I would never have met in my previous life. The woman who once believed her worth depended on keeping her husband happy now understands that true happiness comes from within. When Frank first pretended to have Alzheimer's to manipulate me into asking for a divorce, I thought my world was ending. How could I possibly start over after 36 years of marriage? What would define me if not being a wife and mother? The answer, I discovered, was everything I had neglected while pouring myself into a one-sided relationship: my passions, my education, my independence, my voice. The most powerful lesson I've learned, one I wish I could share with my younger self, is that it's never too late to reclaim your life. Many of us, especially women of my generation, were taught that sacrifice equals love, that endurance equals virtue, that putting ourselves last is the mark of a good wife and mother. But true love, including self-love, should lift you up, not diminish you. It should add to your life, not subtract from it. It should make you more yourself, not less. The courage to walk away from something that no longer serves you isn't failure, it's self-respect. The decision to start over isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is put down the burden you've been carrying and simply walk forward. Unencumbered. If you're standing at the crossroads, wondering if 60 is too late, 50 is too late, 40 is too late to begin again, it's not. The life you want is waiting on the other side of your fear. I'd love to hear your stories of new beginnings, whether they happened at 25 or 75. How did you find the courage to take that first step? What surprised you most about starting over? Share your journey in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more Divorce Diaries with Aunt Charlotte. Remember, we're in this together, supporting each other through every chapter of our unfolding stories.